All right, Warriors of National Guard recruiting. We have another recruiting warrior from the great state of Minnesota. Had the opportunity to run into Sergeant Helland down at the Nashville High Performer Seminar. And he's given us a little bit of his time to see how he does his work. So if you wouldn't mind, if you just give the audience kind of your National Guard and your recruiting story, just to kind of break the ice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, sir. It's an honor to be here with you. I know quite the legend you are. I've heard all the stories, especially from Minnesota. But just to introduce myself, I'm Sergeant Kyle Helland. I joined the National Guard 5 years ago. I actually left for basic training 5 years ago today. So yeah, kind of a funny thing my wife brought up to me today. So yeah, originally I'm an air traffic controller in the National Guard. So I got pretty lucky with my job. I was pretty picky. I was probably a recruiter's nightmare. But yeah, got it to work, had a great recruiter, had a great experience. Went to basic at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, went to air traffic control school in Alabama. Had a good time, came back home, went to St. Cloud State University. And then I was fortunate enough to be a part of the deployment over to Iraq and Kuwait, 2019, 2020. Had a lot of fun, good times with those guys. And I mean, I just had a lot of positive experiences in the Guards. When I came home, I was like, well, I need a job now. So talked to some of my buddies who are in recruiting and figured since, you know, I have a lot of good experience with it, I'd get into it. And started about a year and a half ago, got the schoolhouse done, picked up AGR now. So it's been going really smooth for me.
Wow. So you've not been around recruiting too long.
Nope.
Was this last year your first FY?
Yes. So I started at Stillwater in March of 2021, I believe. And then, yep. And then till now.
And you're done, and you finished your mission at the end of July?
I did, sir. Yep. Our whole office managed to finish in July.
Well, that's pretty awesome, especially given how the year has been for a lot of people. So
yes.
That kind of sets up the first question here is, how did you get done 2 months early?
Well, I mean, got to give it to my boss first and foremost. He's a great leader. He took charge of us throughout the year. We ended up switching bosses halfway through the year, but I enjoyed working for both of them. We were big in our school programs. I think that was our most success, was just hammering those public schools, getting our face in front of those kids as much as possible, to where, you know, now we've got 3-4 schools where we can just walk in and they know us all by our first names, and the kids enjoy actually seeing us and talking to us. And it's not those, you know, lunchroom visits where you're just standing around, not doing anything, waiting for kids to kind of wander up. It's, you know, just being involved with the student body, doing a lot of community events. We did a lot of stuff, you know, the Boys and Girls Clubs, getting out in the community as much as possible. And then my boss is a firm believer in the old school cold calling. So we do a lot of cold calling out of our office, and I mean, it seems to work for us. We got done early, so can't complain.
Well, you have an interesting perspective because you haven't been to recruiting school that long ago.
Yep.
So when it comes to getting that foothold in the schools and getting to where the students know you and they're familiar with you and comfortable with you, how different is it from what you learned at school to what is it in the real world?
I mean, it feels like the schoolhouse takes a very practical approach to it, you know, where it's ABC, follow these steps and it'll work every single time. But obviously, as all of us recruiters know, that's never the case. You know, there's never going to be a perfect person where it's ABC and it's going to work every time. I think compared to the schoolhouse, just being flexible and being able to adapt to your environment is going to be the biggest thing for real world recruiting, where, you know, you're not going to sit down with a kid and be like, hey, what's your motivators and values? And they're going to stare at you and be like, oh, yep, I want to do this, this, and this. I want to work in this career field. I want this for college benefits. So it's just being able to adapt, really, and just being a flexible recruiter, I think, helps a lot.
And I do think one of the things that they do not, I mean, it's difficult to prepare anyone for it, but the level of rejection, you know, it's a 99% versus 1%. 1% are going to serve. So how have you guys handled that? You know, like you've been around for like a year and a half, so you've had some success, but no doubt you've had more rejection than success.
Yeah, so I have a funny story about that. I guess, you know, my first day at my first duty location, I sat down and made about 5 cold calls, and one of those ended up enlisting the next week. So when I started, I was like, oh, this is easy. And then, over time, realize you're going to deal with rejection a lot. I've had quite a few incidences with parents and applicants now, and it's just not letting it get to you, I think, is the biggest thing. Wake up every day, today's a new day and I've got a job to do, so I got to get out there, be involved. Follow up with your current applicants obviously is huge. Don't let people trail off and disappear. We all have horror stories about that happening. So I think just hunt the good stuff. Just stay positive and don't let those no's get to your head, because at the end of the day, if you ask 100 people every single day, someone's going to come into your office, right?
Yeah, well, I do think a lot of your peers out there, because most of our recruiters around the country, probably about a third, are on their first tour.
Yep.
And so people have a tendency to get a little bit disillusioned, like, well, I'm doing stuff and it's not working. But one thing that you just mentioned is like the 100, right?
Yep.
You kind of blew off the 100. Like if I talk to 100 people, because a lot of people aren't talking to 100 people.
No, I think that's the issue is, we started the year with a point system. It's pretty typical in recruiting, but we came to realize, like, hey, if we want to get done early, screw this point system. We just got to talk to people. Like, you don't want recruiters sitting there all day thinking, oh yeah, I set 2 points. It's 3 PM. I'm going to go home now. And, that's how you get modern day recruiting, where you kind of get in that bad mindset where, oh, we're never going to finish, what's going wrong? We're not, we're working our butts off. Look at all these points we're setting. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, you might have rescheduled something, counted that as a point. You wanted to go home early. And just understanding that if you're there to work, work those long hours, it's going to pay off in the end.
Well, because you got your mission delivered early, you're probably not, well, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You're probably not thinking, well, the whole generation is just won't do it.
Yeah.
Because I've heard a little bit of that, like, well, these kids are a lot different, which I think every older generation has said that about the upcoming generation. So
yeah, I mean, I think me being 5 years removed from high school kind of gives me an advantage over some other recruiters, where I can kind of still relate to these younger generations. But I think at the end of the day, they still want to be successful in their lives. Not a lot of them want to just bum it out. They want to figure it out, right? So if you can sit down and talk with them and be like, hey, you got to get this together. You want to do something with your life. This is going to help you. I think just helping them understand that they need to take that next step really helps.
Well, you had mentioned in your introduction that, you got the job you wanted and you had the deployment experience. How much of just really being a believer in the Guard do you think contributes to your success as a recruiter?
I think just, and I'm speaking for the Minnesota National Guard, obviously, as an organization as a whole, I feel like we've always excelled at every single task we've been presented with. We had a lot of state active duty between, the protests a couple of years ago and the COVID care management facilities. And I mean, I would be very proud to say that we went above and beyond what anyone expected the National Guard to be capable of, because you got all the active duty guys who make fun of us. Oh, you got the weekend warriors, but at the end of the day, we're still Minnesotans, right? So I think a lot of us do care a lot about Minnesota, and we want to help take care of it.
Yeah, I do think that it has. Some people get into recruiting that don't have a positive view of their state or their Guard. I don't know why, but it happens. And so if you don't really believe it's a good deal, it's very difficult to represent that. So I think that's kind of like stomping on the floor. This is going to be on the test to your peers out there. Like if you're all in, it makes a big difference.
Exactly.
And so you also mentioned like having a focus on getting done early. So where did that come from for you?
Well, I know my NCOIC, he's historically a very successful recruiter. So I knew I could trust him coming into it. I actually came to this team right at the change of NCOICs. So apparently I didn't know the old NCOIC, but they weren't as productive. And, First Sergeant Ross, he's a very productive NCOIC and he helps us out a lot. So that motivated me. And then working under First Sergeant Herr when I initially came to Maplewood was a bit of a culture shock, because he is, hitting the floor running, we're working, and coming from the office I was wasn't. That was quite the adjustment. But once you see the numbers start coming and you're not working weekends anymore and you're getting the recognition and the praise from your leadership, I think that's where it's now going into next year. Like you say, I'm still a pretty fresh recruiter, but now I can see that light at the end of the tunnel where I know if I put in the hard work in the first 6 months of the year, I'm not going to have to work as hard this last 6 months.
Yeah, right now, having that mission behind you opens up the door to stuff that you want to do.
Exactly.
So getting the mission done early, what have you been able to do since you get your mission done?
Oh, I mean, I've had free time galore. I'm doing whatever I want most days, working around the house, visiting family a lot because a lot of my family's in northern Minnesota. So I've been going, hanging out with them, planning a trip. Actually, I'm going to go see my brother graduate basic training in September. So that's going to be a lot of fun for us. And then we're thinking about taking a little road trip here soon too. So yeah, just, a lot of fun stuff where since we worked hard at the start of the year, now we have that free time to start doing kind of whatever we want.
Well, recruiting is the best job in the Army if you're good.
Exactly.
So heading into the next year, what are your goals in recruiting? Where do you want to get in the organization?
Well, I definitely see myself pursuing master badge first and foremost. I think that's something completely attainable at the office I'm at. So come September, we're going to hit the ground running late September, get into the schools, start setting up school visits, try to get that, 1 foot forward to where when we show up, all the kids aren't like, who are these guys? Like, we've never seen these guys before. So just set ourselves up for a big year and then hopefully, get done even earlier than we did this year. I think we're shooting for May next year.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure some recruiters out there that listen to this podcast will say the things that you're talking about, I'm not sure that they would work for me. When you're talking about cold calling and getting your school, like my schools are very difficult to get into, like your schools aren't. So what would you say to those individuals that are kind of naysayers about that kind of approach?
I would say I would go back to the point that I brought up about being flexible, right? Like it's highs and lows in recruiting. Everybody knows that, where you're going to have months where, as an office, we have 4 AGR recruiters and we write a 2. And then, the next month we're going to write a 9 or a 10. So, I mean, highs and lows, you just got to hunt the good stuff, really. I just realized throughout the year, if you get in that negative mindset where it's just a loop on repeat of, yeah, this sucks, I'm not able to get into my schools, I can't find people, and you're just talking yourself down. Well, 1, that's going to hurt you, but 2, that's 100% going to influence the people you work with and bring them down as well. So I think just having that positive mindset and trying to hunt the good stuff every day and just, focus on the job when you're at work. And then when you leave work, that's your time. That's your personal time.
Have you gotten honed in on where you're spending your time? Like you're trying to get into those high schools, but within the high school, have you gotten honed in on a group that you think, well, we do pretty well with this group?
Yeah, definitely. So what I recommend people to get into the schools initially is, just show up and be like, hey, we can bring a faculty fee. Because I feel like, at the end of the year, there's so much RFF money that doesn't get properly utilized to where the state's saying, hey, what happened to all this money? Why did you guys use it? So I think if recruiters, ask leadership, learned how to use some of that money a little more efficiently, that would help them on the back end completely. Because getting your face in front of the teachers, bring, a flyer like, hey, we'll come in, teach your class for the day. You can have, we call it a prep day for the teachers to where you can kind of do whatever work you need to get done and we'll take care of the students, and just focusing on junior and senior teachers. So finding those teachers where that the student body you're talking to is some of them are going to be qualified. So just being able to get in front of the kids and talk to them, you're going to be bringing people into the office.
Well, and I think that gets into probably most recruiters' heads, like, we're trying to reach everybody, but really we're not.
Yep.
Like if everybody was a yes, we wouldn't, that wouldn't work out either.
Well, and I think a lot of recruiters, they'll send the emails, they'll make the phone calls, but if you're not in person in front of those teachers, I mean, they're teachers, right? They've got a busy job as well. They're grading papers, they're teaching students, they've got a personal life at home. So I think if you show up and actually get in front of those teachers and you're able to present yourself, that goes a long way.
Yeah, it is kind of a matter of keeping on knocking on the door too. It's very difficult to say no when you're in front of somebody. but it's really easy to ignore an email. You know,
Exactly.
which I'm sure you've experienced.
Yes.
So hammering it out. I talked to your station leader or station commander earlier today. I'm just curious about like the front end. You get a new boss and it's like, we're gonna make 200 phone calls a day. What was your thought initially about that?
My current boss, Sergeant Maxon, he's grown on me a lot. I think he's a phenomenal leader. He comes from the 82nd Airborne, so he brought a little bit of that active duty hula hula when he first showed up. But I think we've all felt each other out, and I think there's a great dynamic in the office. Honestly, he's like I said, phenomenal leader. When he first came, I was like, whoa, this guy. I mean, my first thought was this guy's really high speed. Like you could tell that he had some background from somewhere. Learning more about him, I mean, I'm very excited to go into the next year working with him.
And I would guess, just correct me if I'm wrong, it's like when you're successful, it's easier to like your office partners.
Yep.
Less conflict. There's enough enlistments to go around. Everybody get their number. It's a lot easier to like each other.
Yep.
So when you have that month that is the 2 and it's supposed to be a 6 and your boss was trying to get you to 10, how do you keep from being at each other's throats?
Well, when I said that too, I was actually thinking of the specific month when he took over, when everything was crazy and we ended up writing it too. So that was an unfortunate month, but he's always cared about our morale. There's never been a time where he's just like, yeah, screw my guys, I'm not taking care of them today. Like I'm focusing on myself. He's there for the early hours and he'll stay for the late hours. So I've always realized, I came to realize if, my boss is sitting there with me, doing the hard stuff with me, I probably shouldn't be really complaining about much because, everybody knows there's bosses out there who are not going to care about it that much. And they're going to task their guys out to do all the crappy work and not show up to a lot of it. So I think, this, like I said, I have limited experience within the recruiting battalion, but I think if as leaders, as station commanders, if they realize like, hey, if I look out for my guys, they're going to look out for me. I think that's a great mindset to have moving forward.
Well, you mentioned you were an air traffic controller. Your station commander is a 13 Bravo.
Yep.
What other MOSs do you have in your office?
We have us two. We have a 68 Whiskey combat medic. We have a 42 Alpha human resource specialist, and then our ADOS is a wheeled vehicle mechanic.
So that's a really good mix. Do you think that that's helpful to the team?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sitting down in interviews, I always introduce my coworkers, whoever's there. And, I think being able to say that, or even if, you only have one office partner, bringing up other people on your team, the different jobs that they do, I think that helps kind of get into the applicant's head that like, oh, wow, these guys don't just, like I say word for word in my interviews is we don't all just pick up big guns and shoot guns, right? Like, as you can see, like I've never had to pick up a gun and shoot a gun at anything except for, paper targets. So if that's, if that's not something that the applicant wants to do, I think it helps establish in their head, like, yeah, they wear the cool uniforms, but not all of them do the scary stuff that a lot of the applicants are scared to do.
Well, yeah, it's a highly technical field, the combat arms field, a couple support type jobs. It's kind of the whole bit that the Army
exactly.
So that's good stuff. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I would. Right now, we got about 6 weeks left in the FY, and there's a lot of recruiters out there that are struggling. Yep. And even with your limited experience, I'm wondering what advice would you would give them on finishing up the year and given where they're at right now. Maybe they're feeling like they can't do it,
Yeah, well, what I would say to that is keep trying. You never want to just give up and throw your hands in the air and call it quits because, we're all NCOs, we're professional, we need to do our jobs. But I mean, my advice to them would be, October 1st, it's a brand new year. It's a time to start over and maybe reflect on the year, these last few weeks, see what worked for you, see what didn't. I highly recommend keeping track of everything you do in some form of calendar. I know my office, we use the Outlook calendar, so we're all tracking everything that's going on. And, at the end of each month, we've gone back, looked at applicants' phone numbers, who fell off, see who didn't show up, see what happened, and just reflect on the year and see if you can make a new game plan for the next year.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a good idea to look at what has happened and, adjust fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you had mentioned before is, if you talk to enough people, someone's going to show up in your office.
Exactly.
And I think that is like some measure of comfort as you get through a big pile of no's. A yes is coming. It's coming.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate you doing this. I think it's awesome getting done early. And your state lets you come out to Nashville. So I've had the opportunity to work with you a little bit. And keep on doing what you're doing. I think a
Yes,
lot
sir.
of workers can benefit from what you had to say.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Good deal.